The galaxy knew peace. Not because peace was natural, but because fear kept the balance. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the most advanced species across 17 arms of the spiral, ruled with cold precision. They catalogued every world, every species, and kept a tight leash on potential threats. Civilizations were either absorbed, pacified, or eliminated before they reached instability. Except Earth. Earth was a mystery. Not because it wasn't known. Earth was listed, archived, and observed. The species known as Homo sapiens, humans, were marked as pre-warp primitives with aggressive tendencies but limited global coordination. A minor threat, containable, not worth direct interference. They were monitored from afar through deep space probes and quiet observation outposts hidden on the moon. But the truth? The truth was, Earth didn't exist, not the way they thought, because Earth was never the real name. It was a mask. And when the Council discovered what the planet's true name was, it wasn't curiosity that followed. It was silence, terror, panic. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. Not for them. Aboard the Thalanir, one of the Council's advanced reconnaissance dreadnoughts, High Custodian Relthar monitored the uplink from the Sol system. The data was boring, as usual. Humans still divided, still violent, still grounded. No faster-than-light capabilities, no off-world colonization, primitive comms tech, nuclear weapons, sure, but so old-fashioned it was laughable. "Another decade," he muttered, his mandibles twitching, "and we'll sterilize the biosphere, just to be safe." Beside him, Intelligence Director Quarn tilted his snout. "Permission to begin cultural dissection. They've developed quantum computing in isolated labs. A few more decades, and they'll link it with AI." Relthar scoffed. "Let them. It'll break them before they break anything else. These mammals can't even agree on their own climate. They're chaos incarnate." And that was the assumption. Every file, every data point the Council gathered painted the same picture. Humanity was aggressive, unstable, and fractured. Dangerous only to themselves. Certainly not worth fear. Just a minor disease in a remote system, unworthy of war. A minor note in the Council's Book of Control, until the file opened, until the forbidden archive unlocked, until someone, some arrogant intern deep in the data mines of the Council's inner archives, typed the wrong query, a linguistic match to an ancient term. A name buried in fire and death. Terra, not Earth, not Sol 3, not human homeworld. Terra, a word not spoken in over 10 millennia, a name scratched off records, burned out of memory, a name that made ancient empires kneel, a name that once conquered sectors, then vanished into legend. Somewhere, far from Council eyes, on the edge of the Orion Drift, a lone human sat in an underground bunker, his face worn, his eyes cold, scars wrapping down from his temple to his collarbone. He wasn't a soldier anymore, not officially, not after what they did to his unit. But he felt it, in his bones. They were watching again. He sipped stale black coffee and stared at the glowing red dot on his terminal. Low orbit scan. They were close. He leaned back and cracked his neck. "So," he whispered. "They finally figured it out." He walked to the wall and pressed his palm against a steel-locked panel. A whir, then a hiss. The wall opened, revealing a vault behind ancient alloy and dust. Inside were weapons no one had seen in centuries, ones outlawed by Council decree. Forgotten tech. Names etched on the handles: Legion Protocol, Project Revenant, Terra Core Command. He picked one up, smiled faintly, the kind of smile only a ghost makes. "We warned them," he said, loading a core cell into the rifle. "We gave them time. We gave them peace. They thought we were gone." A beat. They just remembered why we shouldn't be. They didn't realize what they had done. Yet, when the archive opened, it wasn't supposed to be readable. The data was encrypted with molecular locks, forged in an age when computers weren't made of silicon and light, but of thought and sacrifice. It wasn't a simple database. It was a prison, and they had just kicked open the door. At first, the council didn't respond. The inner circle denied the discovery. Denial is always easier than fear. But fear was already blooming. Quietly, in the offices and back rooms of Council Command, in the way operatives stopped making jokes over meal cubes, in the way ambassadors avoided eye contact when speaking of Sector 7C. Something had changed. They had found the word. Terra. Not just a name, not just a world. It was a warning carved into the bones of dead stars. The Council's oldest species, the Thalrex, remembered it. But only in whispers. Myths about a world so dangerous, the Council purged every record of its existence. It wasn't that Terra had been defeated. It had disappeared, voluntarily, quietly, and the universe breathed easier when it did. Until now. Down on Earth, Terra, inside that buried facility on the Siberian Ridge, the man called Grant opened the last terminal. There was no fanfare. Just the glow of red light bathing his scarred face. He typed in the access code by memory, not by prompt. The system didn't ask for verification. It knew him. The screen came to life, not with modern UI, not with icons or menus, just text, flickering, stark white on black. Welcome back, Colonel. Project, Revenant status, dormant, global surveillance, active, foreign eyes detected, confirmed. Last order, stand down. New order? Grant didn't hesitate. He typed, wake the dead. For 15 years, he had stayed silent, lived off-grid. Watched from shadows as the Earth fell deeper into its usual chaos. Petty wars, media distractions, broken politics, division by design, the perfect camouflage, the perfect lie. Let them think humans were weak. Let them believe the house was burning. But underneath the rot, there was iron. Always had been. He walked down a long corridor, metal echoing under his boots. At the end was a stasis chamber with 6 black pods, each one marked with a symbol, not a name. Names were too dangerous. He stood in front of pod Order 1. His reflection looked back at him, old and tired. He raised a hand, fingers trembling, not from fear, but from something worse, anticipation. He pressed the release button, a hiss, a low growl of ancient machinery awakening from death. The pod cracked open, steam curling out like breath from a beast. Inside lay a man twice his size, muscles coiled like cable, eyes shut but fists clenched, not asleep, just waiting. A voice broke through the silence, deep, low, and sharp as steel. You finally bring me back, Grant? Grant nodded once. They said the word. The man opened his eyes, pitch black, hungry. Terra? Grant only replied with a grim nod. Then the galaxy just made its worst mistake. In the core chambers of the Galactic Council's capital, Vashtora, the High Assembly met in emergency silence. There were no media feeds, no translators, just a dozen species, each more ancient and powerful than anything Earth had ever faced. And yet, not one of them dared raise their voice. The one who spoke was the Thalrex Warden General, a creature made of bone and ash, one of the oldest beings in the galaxy. We buried them, it rasped. We erased the name, sealed the knowledge. We signed the pact of burning to forget. Why did you dig? The inquiry officer, barely out of her 3rd hatch cycle, tried to respond. We didn't mean to. The AI made a match with the old glyphs. We thought it was just an Earth nickname. The warden's voice cracked like thunder. Terra was never just Earth. It was a civilization that made gods weep and monsters beg. They fought the void and won. They crafted weapons that could rewrite memories across star systems. And when they were done, they vanished. Not defeated, not destroyed. They chose to disappear. Another council member, a scaled diplomat from the Wormkin, hissed. But if they're primitives now, what's the threat? The warden turned, eyes like collapsing stars. They were never primitives. They were just pretending. Across the Sol system, hidden satellites powered by long-dead Terra tech blinked awake. They had been waiting for one command, the one Grant had typed. Wake the dead. The signal reached facilities buried under ice caps, inside ocean trenches, inside Mars itself. Weapons long outlawed, AI units with consciousness locked behind ethical walls, orbital defense platforms disguised as junk. All of it began to pulse with red light. One word echoed through every old Terra node. Revenant Online. Grant watched the stasis pods crack open one by one. The old crew was coming back. There was Marek, the ex-berserker with titanium bones and a taste for orbital drops without a suit. Silas, the tactician who once tricked an empire into killing itself. Wraith, the saboteur who could melt into cities and leave nations screaming. Thomas, the sniper who once fired a shot through 4 kilometers of vacuum. And last of all, the one they all feared. Adair. They never called him a soldier. Not even a man. Adair was something else. They called him the Ghost Maker. Adair didn't speak when his pod opened. He didn't ask questions. He just stood up, flexed his fingers, and stared at Grant. Time? He asked. Grant nodded. It's time. Adair turned to the others. Get dressed, load out, burn the maps. The game's back on. Back in council space, riots had already begun. The leak spread faster than any virus. The word Terra was forbidden. But now it was everywhere. Hacked broadcasts, graffiti on city spires, children chanting it in schools before being dragged away. Whole worlds that once laughed at the idea of human danger now wondered if they had laughed too soon. And the fear? It wasn't about war. It was about what else the council had lied about. If Terra had existed, what else did? How many other extinct threats were just hidden? The council scrambled to regain control. They initiated emergency memory wipes on 5 border worlds, deployed suppression fleets, erased the word from every comms network. Too late. It was already inside them. One phrase became a curse in every alien tongue. They're awake. On Earth, Grant and the team stood on a launch pad deep beneath Antarctica. The wind outside howled like a dying beast, but the facility was still warm, powered by a core reactor older than any modern city. Where are we going? Marek asked. Grant checked the holographic star chart. Moonbase first, then Jupiter Relay, then the kill switch. Kill switch for what? Silas asked. Grant looked at them all, and his voice dropped to a whisper. For the council. There was silence, until Wraith chuckled darkly. So we're actually doing it. Doing what? Thomas said, checking his rifle. Grant turned toward the launch doors. The sky above was beginning to crack with flame. Finishing what Terra started. The launch wasn't quiet. Not like before, back when the world didn't notice things like heat trails or missing satellites. Back then, the shadows were deeper, cleaner. Now? The moment Terra's sky cracked with flame, every observatory from New Zealand to Norway picked it up. Amateur astronomers posted clips to forums, claiming it was a comet. Others said it was another billionaire rocket stunt. But it wasn't. It was a Titan-class vessel. The Reclamation, forged under the Himalayas, buried for decades, fueled by black core hydrogen, built for only one purpose: war, Not the modern kind, not the kind where politics danced with drones. This was old war. Brutal. Final. Inside, the crew strapped in. Grant sat in the forward command seat, fingers tense against steel armrests, his eyes locked on the view ahead. The black sky of Earth swallowing them, the curvature of the blue planet fading behind layers of fire and smoke as the ship broke atmosphere. "You feel that?" Marek grinned, strapping down his shoulder cannon. "She still hums like a beast." "Still calibrated to your pulse?" Grant asked without turning. Marek patted the hull beside him. "She knows who I am." Grant didn't doubt it. These weren't normal ships. Each of them was encoded to the DNA of their operators. Each one only answered to Terra-born warriors. No one else. No alien. No council puppet, no outsider could ever fly it. And if they tried, the ship would eat them. Far above, in Council Watch Post 7K orbiting Neptune, panic set in. "Unidentified ship launched from Earth's southern pole. It bypassed orbital surveillance grids." "Impossible," the commander barked. "Earth has no registered launch facilities in that quadrant." Another officer turned, panic in her gill-lined voice. "It just jumped to Phase 1 velocity. It's not accelerating, it's tearing gravity. What class?" They paused. Then the screen lit up with a name they hadn't seen since before most of them were born. Terra Vessel, Reclamation, Status, Excommunicated. The commander's blood froze. "Notify Central, now." "But sir." "Now." He stared at the growing blip on the screen. It was moving too fast, too direct. Not a test, not a bluff. This was an act of war. Inside the Reclamation, Grant opened the comms terminal. A red screen blinked. Moon Base Sigma. Signal intact, Jupiter. Relay compromised, alternate route required. He exhaled slowly. "They've already started locking us out," he muttered. Silas leaned over. "What's the play?" Grant turned towards the crew. "We skip Jupiter. We run the Europa loop, hit the dark side station. It's off-grid, cold, hidden. They won't be watching it." "Europa's a graveyard," Thomas growled. "You remember what happened there?" "I do," Grant said. "That's why we're going." Meanwhile, in the Council's inner fleet chamber, the word had spread. Terra had moved. They had awakened a relic, a warship. The Council didn't ask questions this time. They didn't wait for debate or democratic noise. They did what they had trained to do since the Silence Protocol was written in the blood of 5 billion beings. They deployed the Harvester fleet. 15 kill ships, automated dreadnoughts. No crew, no hesitation, no moral core. The kind of weapons the Council denied even existed. Each one carried an AI pre-programmed with one mission: eradicate threats to galactic continuity. Terra was back. And continuity was shaking. Inside the Reclamation, as they neared Europa's orbit, the ship suddenly stuttered. A low groan ran through its bones. Adair stood near the viewport, silent until now. He spoke without looking back. "They found us." "How many?" Grant asked. Adair didn't check a screen. He didn't need to. 4, Harvester class. Closing fast." "Do we run?" Thomas asked. Adair looked at him. That blank expression, the one everyone hated. The one that always meant one thing. "We hunt." The Reclamation's engine surged. Systems lit up like veins across the ship's underbelly. Missile tubes rotated. Plasma arrays spun open. Marek was already at the fire control station. "Oh, I've missed this." Silas coordinated flanking vectors, while Thomas calibrated the long-range rail cannon. Grant sat back in the command chair and whispered, "Show them why they feared us." The ship responded. Engaging combat protocol, Revenant mode. Within seconds, it moved, not like a vessel but like a predator in zero gravity, the kind of movement that wasn't supposed to be possible. No hesitation. No drift. One harvester spotted them and charged. The reclamation let it get close. Then Adair flicked a single switch. From the ship's underbelly, a grav-mined lance exploded forward. Not a beam, not a missile, a black spear of collapsed matter, traveling faster than light, bending space around it. It didn't hit the harvester. It erased it. Gone. Just gone. No wreckage. No data. No signature. The other three adjusted, instantly dividing into evasive formation. They weren't stupid, but it didn't matter. Grant stood up. "We're not trying to win this fight." Silas glanced at him. "We're not? We're making a statement." Then he keyed in the command. Broadcast frequency. Open galactic message. Begin a live feed lit up. Grant's face front and center, his voice loud across the stars. "This is Colonel Grant, Revenant-class operative, Terra Division. To those in power, you knew who we were. You lied. You buried us. You fed the galaxy a story about peace and progress while hiding the war you couldn't finish." He paused, fire in his throat. "Well, we're back." A beat. "And this time we're not taking prisoners." Then he cut the feed. Seconds later, the reclamation spun and charged directly into the nearest harvester, moving at a vector so fast the enemy AI couldn't react in time. It wasn't suicide. It was surgical chaos. Thomas fired the main cannon mid-charge. The projectile split the harvester in two, venting its artificial intelligence core into vacuum like a blown lung. Marek fired the ventral EMP array. The third ship froze, locked in a loop, blind and deaf. Only one remained, and it ran. Adair smiled. Not like a man, like a wolf. They remember now. Back on Council Prime, the inner circle finally broke. The Warden General smashed his staff across the table. "You said they were gone!" The intelligence director wiped sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. We believed the reports. No life signs. All Terra systems inactive. No launches in over 40 cycles. "They weren't dead," the Warden roared. "They were hiding." A newer council member, young and bold, whispered, "What do we do?" No one answered. Because no one had a plan for this. You don't reason with revenants. You don't negotiate with ghosts. You survive them. If you're lucky. On Europa, the reclamation descended in silence. The moon's surface was dead. No lights, no stations, nothing visible, until the ice cracked. Below the frozen crust, a station opened. Terra's last cold vault. Inside it, satellites, black archives, data fragments from the collapse, the last maps of the outer ring. Grant walked ahead of the team. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He was looking at a coffin-sized container near the center of the vault. "Is that it?" Thomas asked. Grant nodded. "Project Lazarus." Wraith winced. "We were never supposed to open that." "Yeah," Grant said. "But the Council was never supposed to come back either." He placed his hand on the biometric pad. The container unlocked. And inside, something moved. Something that shouldn't have. Something that the Council thought had been burned out of the universe 10,000 years ago. Not a weapon. Not a man. Something in between. Grant turned to the others. "They called us monsters." He looked down at the thing inside. They had no idea. No one spoke as the lid of the Lazarus container fully lifted. It was not a coffin. It was a lockbox, built to hold what should never walk again. The room's temperature dropped. The lights flickered. The reclamation itself, miles above Europa in orbital standby, sent a pulse through its systems. A warning. Not to the crew, but to the galaxy. Lazarus Protocol. Breached. Inside the container lay a human body, or something once human. His skin was pale, like stone rubbed in ash. Wires had been grafted under his flesh, pulsing with dull orange light. His eyes remained shut. His chest didn't rise, but the room knew he was alive. You could feel it, like the gravity had grown heavier. Grant stared at him. No expression, no awe, just cold acceptance, like a man seeing an old wound for the first time in years. "He doesn't look like much," Thomas muttered. "He's not supposed to," Wraith whispered. "That's the trick." Adair tilted his head. "What version is he?" Grant responded without turning. 2. "Second gen?" Merrick asked, backing half a step. "You brought him?" Grant turned toward his team. "We either wake him or we start carving a grave for Earth." Silas folded his arms, face hardening. "What if he wakes up and remembers what we did to him?" Grant looked down at the body. "Then we die." Back on Council Prime, the Harvester Fleet's report had reached full transmission. 4 units sent, 3 destroyed, 1 damaged and in retreat, all by a single ship. And worse, a confirmed activation of Project Lazarus, the last redacted file from the Terra Wars. A myth so dangerous that even speaking the project's name was a crime punishable by execution. In the Council War Room, arguments erupted. "We should sterilize Earth now, before whatever they unleashed spreads." "No," said a more cautious member. "If we fire on a Council-classified pre-sentient world without formal approval, the syndicates will rebel. The core planets will call it genocide. They won't care," another shouted. "Not once they find out what Terra really built." The Warden General raised a hand, and silence followed. He looked at the display, an old schematic retrieved from the forbidden files. A diagram of something that wasn't quite human. "Project Lazarus," he growled. "They didn't build a superweapon." He tapped the screen, bringing up internal images of twisted DNA sequences, cybernetic blueprints, and collapsed AI simulations. They built the first post-human. Lazarus opened his eyes. They didn't glow. There was no cinematic spark, no burst of power, just eyes. Human. Blue. Quiet. But the silence that followed was louder than any scream. He sat up slowly. His bones didn't crack. Muscles didn't strain. Everything about him moved like he was already in control. Wraith took a cautious step back. Merrick raised a pulse rifle, aiming low. Only Grant didn't move. The figure looked at Grant and spoke, voice calm and flat. "How long?" 16 years. "Why?" Grant exhaled. "Because the Council finally remembered." The man, if he could still be called that, stood. Naked but unbothered, his body lined with scars that didn't look like they came from knives or bullets. These were surgical, deep like someone had cut reality into him. "I was supposed to stay dead." "You were supposed to be a failsafe," Grant said. "Turns out we still need one." The man stared at him, and something flickered in his expression. Not recognition, not hatred. Just the quiet understanding of a machine calculating the probability of betrayal. He looked at the others. "You left me." Merrick's voice cracked. "You weren't you anymore. You killed Turner. You melted part of the base walls with your blood." The man nodded slightly. "I remember." Grant didn't flinch. "Can you control it now?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he walked across the room to a sealed rack embedded in the wall. Without asking, without hesitation, he placed his hand on the biometric reader. The wall opened. Inside was his armor. Not sleek, not shiny, a patchwork of old metals, nano-weave, and something that flickered between matter and code. He slipped into it like a second skin. "I'll help," he said. Everyone relaxed an inch. "But when it's done," he added, voice ice, "I decide how this ends." Grant nodded. "Fair." They left Europa behind with a black box trail left for the Council to find. A message written in their own language, a code buried in myth. "The ghosts have teeth." The Warden General stood over the decoded message. "They want us to chase them." The youngest of the assembly, a diplomat born long after the Terra silence, blinked. "Why?" The warden looked up, face grim. "Because that's how they hunt." The reclamation entered deep drift, beyond Saturn's reach, moving toward the Orion Gap. No comms, no signals, nothing but space and vengeance. Lazarus stood at the front viewport, staring at the stars like he remembered something they didn't. "You know they'll sterilize Earth," he said, calm as ever. Grant nodded. "We're not going back." Silas turned. "Then where?" "The Council's cradle world," Grant replied. Vashtorra. Wraith narrowed his eyes. "You want to hit the capital?" "No," Grant said. "I want to expose it." He pulled up an old file, one even the Council thought they deleted. A hidden sector, a vault planet, where the Council buried their lies, genocides, forbidden experiments, failed species. "The truth's buried there," Grant said, "and once the galaxy sees what they're hiding, their power breaks." Thomas nodded slowly. "They'll never let us reach it." Lazarus smiled, just a slight twitch of the lip. "Then we'll stop asking for permission." Back on Earth, the first signs of retaliation began. Satellites stopped responding. Deep-sea data cables fried without cause. Banking systems failed. Space agencies reported anomalies in the sky, then went dark. There were no explosions, no ships. Just a silence spreading over the planet like frost. Then, out of nowhere, the skies lit up for exactly 8 minutes. Thousands of small flashes, precise, targeted. By the time it ended, 47 secret bases, built during Terra's silent withdrawal, were gone. Entire labs, caches, weapons stations, erased in blinding bursts of kinetic fire. The Council had fired its first true warning. Inside the reclamation, the crew watched the report feed in cold silence. Grant gritted his teeth. "They're trying to wipe the slate." "They think Earth is the only threat," Merrick said. "They're wrong," Grant replied. Lazarus turned from the viewport. "Let me off the leash." "No," Grant said. "Not yet." "You brought me back," Lazarus said, taking a step forward. "Don't pretend you didn't know what that meant." "I know exactly what it meant," Grant snapped. "It means we still fight smart. We don't torch the stars. We light the right fuse and let them burn themselves down." Lazarus stared at him, then sat. "Just say when." In the heart of Council space, panic spread through the less loyal systems. Mercenaries, smugglers, black market tech traders. They all started whispering about the same thing. Terra wasn't dead. Some said they had a fleet. Others said they had a god. But what mattered wasn't the truth. What mattered was fear. And fear was the one thing the Council couldn't control. Inside the reclamation, Grant held a datapad, one message blinking, untouched for years. It was from a man who died during the last war, his mentor, his friend. If they ever wake Lazarus, it means we lost the first war, but it also means we still have a chance. Lazarus isn't a man, he's a mirror. He shows the enemy what they really are. And when they look into him, they break. Grant deleted the message, then turned to the crew. "Gear up, next stop, Vault Sector 9. Wraith strapped his blades back on. Merrick cocked his cannon. Thomas loaded his rifle. Silas brought up the maps. Adair adjusted the grav drive. And Lazarus just sat there, waiting, smiling, because war was coming back to the stars, and this time, Terra was hunting. The ship trembled as it exited FTL drift, not because of damage, but because it knew where it was. The reclamation had been here before. So had Grant. Once. Vault Sector 9 was not a place. It was an event, A failure so catastrophic the galaxy buried the coordinates inside Council-encrypted legends. Most species weren't even aware the sector existed. Others swore it was cursed, a spatial dead zone where ships vanished and navigation turned on itself. But it was real, and it was still waiting. From the bridge, they saw it immediately. A single black sun, pulsing faintly in a dead quadrant of space. Around it, rings of derelict stations, artificial moons cracked open like skulls, satellites torn apart and left to drift. No movement, no lights, just silence. Lazarus stood at the viewport, arms folded. They left it all to rot. No, Grant said. They thought no one would ever come back. Silas ran scans across the graveyard. I'm picking up power signatures from the deepest vault station. Shielded. Still active. That's the one, Grant muttered. Merrick leaned forward. Remind me again what they buried here? Grant didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a locked file on his console, Terra Archive 117 Theta, declassified only under protocol extinction. A single phrase glowed on the screen. The children who didn't die. Years ago, during Terra's final years before its vanishing act, a secret operation was launched, one no soldier ever spoke of. Not because it was classified, but because they couldn't stomach it. Vault 9 wasn't for weapons. It was for people. Specifically, the ones who'd survived Project Ascension, a genetic weaponization program meant to evolve humanity beyond war, beyond fear, beyond death. But something went wrong. Or maybe it went exactly right. Dozens of children were born with neural systems that rejected control. They didn't feel pain like others. They saw light differently. Time moved for them in strange loops. They weren't soldiers, they weren't citizens, they were monsters wearing human faces. And Terra didn't kill them. Terra locked them away. The reclamation moved toward the largest station, Vault Core, a monolithic spire tethered to dead satellites by long metallic cables. It looked like a tomb chained to its sins. As they approached, the ship's AI stuttered. Error. Identity conflict. Match found. Welcome back, Unit Lazarus. Everyone turned to Lazarus. He said nothing. He didn't blink. Wraith looked sick. You were one of them? Lazarus stared forward. No. I was the template. Grant placed a hand on the command panel. We go in. Get the files. Extract what we need. Then we burn it. No survivors? Thomas asked. No risks, Grant said flatly. We bring this place down, for good. The ship latched onto the docking ring with a hiss. Airlock systems whined, seals grinding open like teeth unclenching after centuries. They stepped inside, weapons drawn. The interior was lit dimly by emergency blue lights, walls covered in old blood, rusted restraints, oxygen tubes dangling from ceilings like metal vines. Merrick scanned the hall. No signs of life. Scan again, Lazarus said quietly. Silas pinged the walls. Life signs detected count 6, status, active location, deep core. 6, Wraith muttered. What kind of freaks live through 200 years of abandonment? Not freaks, Grant corrected. We made them. They advanced, deeper into the vault, past cryo chambers shattered from the inside. Every step echoed like it woke something ancient. The place smelled of cold metal and regret. And then, a voice, soft, feminine, childlike. You came back. Everyone froze. It hurts here, the voice said. They raised weapons. Lights flickered. In the distance, a shape emerged. A girl, no older than 10, barefoot, wearing a white hospital gown stained with age and blood. But her eyes were not human. They were solid white, no pupils, no iris, just glow. Not angry, not scared. Empty. Grant lowered his weapon slowly. Subject Echo. She smiled. You remember me? Thomas backed up. Grant, she shouldn't be. I know, he cut in. Lazarus stepped forward, staring at her. "I thought you died." "I did," she said. "They keep bringing me back." She looked at Lazarus, head tilting slightly, curious. "You're not done yet." The vault cracked open deeper ahead. One by one they passed holding cells that weren't broken by force, but by power. Metal walls twisted inward, clawed by something inside the prisoners. Glass fused with flesh. Doors melted into bone. They finally reached the core chamber, a circular room with 6 pods, 5 still sealed, 1 open and empty. The girl followed silently. "Can they talk?" Wraith whispered. Echo nodded. "Some of them still dream." Grant stepped towards the main console and inserted his clearance key. The lights went red. Files opened. Truths spilled like oil. Recordings, images, medical logs, screaming. Subject Theta 3, neurogenesis failure, incinerated. Subject Delta 9, kinetic reanimation successful, breached containment, total facility loss. Subject Omega, mental drift exceeded threshold, weaponized empathy detected, sealed, and beneath it all, a warning. If these files are accessed, assume the Council knows. Grant downloaded everything. "I have it," he said. "We go." But Echo just watched him. "You're going to show them, aren't you?" "Yes." "You want to break the galaxy?" "No," he said. "I want to show them who already broke it." She stepped closer, barefoot on steel. "Can I come?" Thomas tensed. "She's dangerous, Grant." "She's proof," Grant replied. "We didn't build her to kill. We built her to evolve. And we locked her up because we didn't like what we saw." Echo smiled faintly. "I like it better out here." As they returned to the reclamation, the first alarms sounded across Council space. The download hadn't gone unnoticed, and someone at the top, someone who remembered Terra far too well, pressed the red key. The red key was never meant to be used. It was the Council's final measure. A broadcast virus. Once sent, it would detonate every archive, erase every recording, and sterilize every species connected to Terra's legacy. End the memory. Erase the threat. The virus pulsed across networks. Worlds began to go silent. Libraries burned. Artificial minds melted. But then, it stopped. On a planet no one visited anymore, old Mars, a signal fired back. Terra countermeasure. Veto activated. Red key rejected. You don't get to forget us. Inside the reclamation, the crew watched as file after file, once thought dead, spread through the galactic web. Clips of children in cages, torture experiments, ascension projects, Council seals approving them all. Billions of citizens across the stars opened their comms that day and saw what their leaders had buried. And the galaxy screamed. Grant stood in the war room, staring at the flickering galactic map. Rebellions flared across dozens of systems. Council ships were grounded. Assassinations, protests, uprisings. "We lit the fire," Wraith whispered. "We're not done yet," Grant replied. "The Council still thinks it can win." Lazarus stepped forward, calm, focused. "Let me go ahead." Grant looked at him. "What are you going to do?" Lazarus smiled. "I'm going to make them remember pain." Lazarus left the reclamation alone. No escort, no formation, no fleet, just a single figure in an aging dropship, moving silently through Council space, flying toward the very heart of the galaxy's most fortified region, Vashtorra Prime, the seat of the Council's power. The ship bore no flags, no IFF codes, no diplomatic lies. But it wasn't stealthy. It didn't have to be. He wanted them to see him coming. Inside Vashtorra's orbital command, alarms screamed, officers scrambled. The perimeter grid lit up like a war zone. Every scan told them the same thing. Identity. Lazarus prototype. Confirmed approach. Vector straight into primary airspace. Threat level, Omega. The Supreme Commander of Vashtora's planetary defense system stood in full armor, teeth clenched, fists shaking. "I want him gone before he touches dirt," he barked. But none of the junior officers moved. One finally spoke, trembling. "Sir, every Harvester AI just shut down. System-wide, all of them, simultaneously." "What?" "They detected his signal and self-terminated." The commander stepped forward. "He's one man." "No, sir," the officer said. "He's Terra's answer." Lazarus didn't fire a single shot. He didn't dodge missiles. He didn't evade tracking systems. He didn't even speak. He just kept coming, and everything designed to stop him simply didn't. Missiles froze in midair. Plasma batteries went silent. The sky itself seemed to hold its breath as Lazarus's dropship descended through Vashtora's atmosphere like a quiet judgment. He landed in the middle of the grand courtyard, a marble space built for galactic parades, lined with flags from every council species, guarded by 1,000 elite troops in silver armor, and not a single one raised a weapon. They all stood, paralyzed, not with fear, not even awe, but submission, because somewhere deep inside their hybrid brains, designed, refined, and conditioned by the Council, there was still a piece of buried code, one they didn't know they had. Do not engage Lazarus. He stepped off the ship and walked straight through them. His boots echoed across polished stone. His face held no expression. His armor, patched and dull, didn't shine like theirs. It didn't need to. His presence wasn't visual. It was felt. He entered the council spire without a word, without clearance, without challenge. Doors opened before him. Security fields blinked off. And when he stepped into the high chamber, the 13 members of the inner council rose from their thrones like insects dragged into light. None of them spoke first, because none of them remembered how to lie to Lazarus. "You're a myth," the Warden General rasped. Lazarus didn't blink. "You made me. I don't forget my creators." Another counselor, smaller and nervous, tried to assert authority. "You're obsolete, a relic of Terra's failure. Your kind were—" "Sealed away?" Lazarus finished. "Buried like children under the floorboards? You tried." He stepped forward. No one dared move. "I woke up in a cage," he said softly, "strapped to tables, monitored by voices that spoke in surgical tones. I saw what you did to the others, the ones who didn't survive the upgrades, the ones you called excess material." He turned toward the warden. "You turned evolution into a meat grinder." The Warden General's claws curled against his robe. "You were never meant to survive." "I didn't," Lazarus said. "Not as I was. That's what makes me useful." Back on the Reclamation, the rest of the crew watched the feed through secured backdoor relays. "Is he negotiating?" Merrick muttered. "No," Grant said. "He's delivering the funeral notice." Adair leaned against the wall, arms folded. "He's not there to talk. He's there to trigger collapse." Silas frowned. "What do you mean?" Adair turned his eyes toward the feed. "Lazarus doesn't just scare people, he breaks systems." Inside the chamber, Lazarus raised his hand, and the air changed. Not just in the room, across every planet governed by the Council, embedded in every child born under their rule, every soldier trained with their neural codes, something buried deep inside began to shake loose. It wasn't memory. It wasn't pain. It was something worse. Truth. Because Lazarus wasn't just a weapon, he was a carrier. Inside his blood were layered frequencies, viral memories, ghost code built from the trauma of every experiment the Council had ever performed on Terra's children. It had been encoded in him without even his full awareness. And now, it was broadcasting. On a Council-controlled planet called Narthex, The entire military garrison dropped to their knees, screaming, not from wounds, but from memories that weren't theirs, memories of being dissected, burned, tested on. Memories that came from Terra's buried experiments, from Vault 9, from the Ascension failures. On Tivasa, a citywide riot broke out, unprompted, unplanned. Millions who had never met each other moved in eerie unison, driven by a collective grief that didn't belong to them. They were weeping for children who died before they were born. On Council Prime, the sky filled with ships fleeing, senators, diplomats, elite families, trying to escape something they didn't understand. But there was nowhere to go. Lazarus had infected the galaxy with remembrance, and memory was fatal to empires built on lies. The Warden General finally snapped. He lunged forward, raising a hand to signal the internal defense grid. Lazarus spoke one word. Don't. Every system inside the council spire shut off. Lights, life support, firewalls, weapons. Every screen went black. Because Lazarus wasn't using code. He was code. You forget, he said quietly, stepping up to the central table. I was never just one of your failures. I was your fail-safe. You built me to end Terra if it ever turned on you. He looked around at the chamber, at the once gods of galactic civilization trembling in their silk and gold. But Terra didn't need ending. He leaned forward. You do. On the reclamation, Echo sat in silence, eyes wide. She could feel it, like her chest was about to break. It's working, she whispered. They're all feeling it. Grant knelt beside her. Can you hold on? She shook her head. It's loud. Wraith adjusted her neural dampener. We need to get her out of system if this goes critical. She's part of it, Grant said, just like him. They all are. Marek looked out the viewport, voice low. What if this doesn't end with the council? What if it spreads too far? Grant met his eyes. Then we finish what we started. Back inside Vashtorra, the council's chamber shook. Not from attack, not from bombs, but from the inside, crumbling. Councilors began to collapse, blood from ears, seizures, heart rates spiking as suppressed guilt surged to the surface. Neural implants fried themselves to stop the data from leaking into their conscious minds. The Warden General was the last to remain standing. Lazarus turned to him. You feared us because you couldn't control what we'd become. You were right. The Warden's mouth opened. No words. Just a whimper. Lazarus tilted his head. This isn't a coup. It's a reset. Then he turned and walked away. The Warden General's heart burst before he hit the floor. By the time Lazarus returned to the reclamation, Vashtorra was already evacuating. Council worlds were turning on themselves. Loyalist fleets were being commandeered. The communication grid was fractured. Civil war had begun. And Terra hadn't fired a single missile. Just woken up. Inside the reclamation's war room, Grant watched the spread. Whole sectors falling like dominoes. Old allies turning, refugees flooding the jump gates. He looked at Lazarus, who stood by the viewport, calm as ever. It's done, Grant said. No, Lazarus replied. What do you mean? Lazarus turned, expression unreadable. We broke their empire, but that wasn't my real purpose. Grant's eyes narrowed. Then what was? Lazarus slowly smiled, not in triumph, but in something almost like sadness. To make sure we never build one ourselves. The galaxy was burning, and it wasn't beautiful. It was terrifying. System after system fell, not to weapons, not to fleets, but to truth. Entire planets detonated in rebellion the second Lazarus broadcast hit their comm grids. On some worlds, the military switched sides before orders even came. On others, command posts were left abandoned, their occupants dead by their own hands, unwilling to live with what they'd once denied. It wasn't chaos, it was reckoning, and Terra was at the center of it. Inside the reclamation, the crew sat in silence as updated feeds poured in. Dozens of major council nodes were offline. Hundreds of council officials executed. Entire races once loyal to the old empire were now pledging allegiance to nothing, just so they could be free from lies. They weren't rallying behind Terra. They were running from the council's ghost. Merrick leaned forward over the holo table, watching footage of burning cities. This isn't war. This is collapse. Wraith rubbed his eyes. That was always the plan. No, Grant said, staring at the center display. The plan was to reveal the truth, not to replace the council. Silas looked over. But we are replacing it, whether we want to or not. That's when Lazarus finally spoke. No, he said, we're not. His voice wasn't loud, but it made everyone turn. He stepped forward, calm, composed. We didn't come back to rule. We came back to remind the galaxy what happens when it lets its masters become monsters. Thomas scoffed. You think they're going to govern themselves? You think after seeing what we showed them, they'll trust anyone again? They shouldn't, Lazarus replied. That's the point. Grant exhaled. We didn't think this far ahead. We assumed we'd die before this part. Adair nodded slowly. Turns out we lived long enough to become the thing we hated. That same hour, the first sign of fracture came. A distress signal, not from a council world, but from a human colony. Altair 3, one of Terra's quiet builds, a world set up years ago during the silent exit, meant for long-term survival, untouched by politics. The message was short, shaky, civilian. This is Dr. Kellen Rohr. Static. Altair 3 is under attack. Unknown ships, not council. They're flying our flag. The signal cut off. Inside the war room, tension snapped like glass. Merrick's jaw clenched. No one outside the Revenant Registry has access to that flag. Adair said it plainly. Someone inside Terra's network is already moving. Silas looked around the room. Who? None of us. Grant raised a hand. It's not one of us. Wraith stepped forward. Then who? Grant answered with one word. The architect. They all went still. Even Lazarus. The architect wasn't a man. Not anymore. He was part of the original Ascension program. But unlike Lazarus, he hadn't been built for the field. He'd been built to design, strategy, war logic, population engineering. They created him to simulate what an evolved Terra would look like if left unchecked. They needed to know how bad it could get. And then they lost control. He disappeared years before the collapse, vanished during the Vault Purge. They assumed he'd died in the fire. Apparently, they were wrong. He waited for us to win, Grant muttered. Let the council fall. Let the chaos spread. Then slip in wearing our banner while everyone's still pointing fingers. Echo, sitting near the corner of the room, spoke for the first time in hours. I've heard his voice, in the static. He's awake now. Grant turned toward her. Do you know where he is? She shook her head. He moves through signals. He doesn't use ships. He sends others. Merrick punched the console. Then Altair 3 isn't the only target. No, Grant said. He's just getting started. They didn't hesitate. Within the hour, the reclamation set course for Altair 3, engines screaming against the void. Inside the armory, the team geared up, heavier than before. This wasn't surgical now. This was direct engagement. This isn't like fighting the council, Wraith muttered as he loaded his carbines. No, Grant agreed. The council lied because it was scared. This thing? It believes it deserves control. Thomas frowned. So we're fighting ourselves? Lazarus, standing by the door, corrected him. No, we're fighting what we could have become. Altair 3 was already burning by the time they arrived. The planet was a mining colony. No military, no heavy defenses, no warships, just workers, civilians, children. And the enemy hadn't come to take territory. They came to make a point. From orbit, they watched black-flagged dropships land in tight, calculated formations. No randomness, no wasted effort. Every movement optimized, too perfect. Adair said it first. They're using Architect Protocol. Silas cursed under his breath. He's rebuilding Terra in the Council's image. No, Lazarus corrected. He's improving on it. Grant gave the order. Gear up. We go down. No survivors, no hesitation. The drop into Altair's atmosphere was silent. Too silent. The reclamation didn't even ping enemy radars. It didn't have to. The architect knew they were coming. He was probably watching already. They landed just outside the colony's outskirts, where the fires hadn't yet reached. Rows of prefab buildings lay in ashes. Civilians executed and left posed like sculptures, messages, not casualties. This wasn't an assault, Wraith muttered. It was theater. Grant stepped over a line of symbols burned into the ground. Not council language, not human either. It was machine glyph, pre-coded logic, instructions, a promise. They found survivors in a sealed storage vault, maybe 24, mostly engineers and kids. One of them, a man in his 50s with dried blood on his forehead, recognized them instantly. You're from the Reclamation, Revenant crew. Grant nodded. Who did this? The man's face twisted. They said they were you, said Terra was done hiding, that the strong would rise. Grant asked the one question he already hated. What did they take? The man looked away. The children. Echo froze. Lazarus stepped forward, jaw tight. He's building a new generation. They tracked the signal to a dark facility 2 clicks east, one that hadn't existed a week ago. No registry, no blueprints. Underground, built fast, built smart, built wrong. Inside, it was all too familiar, like Vault 9 reborn, holding chambers, neural rigs, data spikes hooked into spinal sockets, children on cold tables, half sedated, half conscious. No machines were making noise. Everything operated silently, like the place itself didn't want to be heard. Merrick whispered, He's trying to finish what we stopped. Grant gave the nod. Then we stop it again. They moved like ghosts, through corridors of synthetic horror, rooms lined with trial subjects, some dead, others barely breathing. Echo clung close to Grant, her eyes wide, terrified. Then she stopped. He's here! Everyone raised their weapons, but Lazarus didn't move. He just listened. And then the voice came, not through speakers, not through sound, straight into their minds. You were always afraid of the next step. You erased me because I saw further than you ever would. I don't want to kill Terra. I want to complete it, Grant growled. Where are you? The voice laughed, softly, calm, convicted. Everywhere you look. The central chamber was a nightmare, a circular room, floor to ceiling with databanks, children suspended in transparent cylinders filled with nutrient gel. Above them floated a sphere of light and machinery, humming, twitching. The architect, it no longer had a body, just code. Grant stepped forward, weapon raised. You don't speak for us. The architect pulsed once. Neither do you. Thomas fired. The sphere absorbed it. Energy rippled, harmless. Lazarus stepped forward next, removing his helmet. And for the first time, the voice paused. Brother. You were never my kin, Lazarus said. You're a blueprint they should have burned. They tried, the architect replied. and now you've delivered me a gift." Before anyone could react, the floor lit up. The children's tanks began to drain. Their eyes opened, too wide, too fast, glowing with the same hue as Echo's. She screamed. "They're linked to me! He used my blood! He used me!" Grant didn't hesitate. "Kill it all." Lazarus stepped forward. "Let me." Grant looked at him. "You sure?" "No," Lazarus said, "but I'm the only one who can." As the rest of the team evacuated the children, Lazarus stepped into the chamber alone. The architect's data core opened like a mouth. "You can't destroy me. I'm you, the version they were too scared to finish." Lazarus smiled. "I'm the version they regret finishing." Then he did what only he could. Overwrote himself. His body glowed. Light poured out. Code collided with code. Fire met fire. And in that moment, Lazarus gave up everything. Memories, strength, upgrades, just to burn the one thing that could wear his skin. The architect screamed. And then, silence. When Grant and the others returned, the chamber was empty. No light. No code, no Lazarus, just ash. Echo fell to her knees, silent tears in her eyes. "He saved them all," she whispered, "but he left me alone." Grant knelt beside her. "No, he gave you back your choice." He stood slowly, voice heavy. "Now we finish this. For real this time." The ashes hadn't settled. Inside the chamber where Lazarus faced the architect, the air was still hot. Cables sparked. Cooling systems groaned, failing one after another. And in the center where Lazarus once stood, nothing remained but a crater of scorched steel and scorched code. Whatever he'd done, it hadn't just erased the architect. It had wiped everything tied to him. Echo sat on the edge of the wreckage, knees to her chest. She hadn't said a word since. Her expression was empty. Too much had been taken. Too fast. Wraith and Marek guarded the corridor. Thomas oversaw the evacuation of the surviving children. Silas worked on hard purging the facility's remaining systems, burning every blueprint, every strand of replicated DNA, every trace of architect protocol. And Grant just stood there. Still, watching where Lazarus had vanished. "You all right?" Adair's voice came from behind. "No," Grant muttered. Adair nodded. "Didn't think so." He lit a cigarette, inhaled slow. "You know," he said, "for a man made of code, Lazarus died pretty damn human." Grant's voice was low, bitter. "He was more human than most of us." "Ironic," Adair said, exhaling. "The one they built to end Terra ended up saving it." The aftermath was not what they expected. When word spread of the architect's defeat, the rebellion didn't stop. It grew. Because it wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't about the council. Or even Terra. It was about what people had seen, what they'd felt. That glimpse behind the curtain, the reminder that everyone had been manipulated, used, bred for order by the hands of something older and uglier than politics. And once you see that, you don't go back. The reclamation drifted in high orbit over Altair 3, battered but functional. Refugee ships docked one after another, unloading survivors from council space, rebel fleets, and even deserters from once loyal systems. The crew watched it all unfold from the war room. A storm of change with no center, no leader. "Word from Vashtorra," Silas reported. "The last remaining counselor was executed by his own people. The rest are gone, fled, dead, or hiding." Grant stood over the display table, watching 1,000 red pins vanish from the galactic map. Marek crossed his arms. "So that's it? We won?" "No," Grant said flatly. "We just removed the leash." Adair leaned in. "And now everyone gets to run wild." "Yeah?" Grant muttered. "Including us." They met that night in the lower hangar. the surviving Revenant crew, Echo, and a dozen rebel leaders who'd made it out of the collapse. Men and women from different species, former enemies now forced to share air in a world with no masters. The air in the chamber was thick. No one wanted to say what had to be said. So Grant said it. "We don't get to lead." The room went silent. "You all want to build something new? Fine. Build it. Rebuild what the council burned. Fix the systems. Protect the kids. Trade, talk, govern. But don't look to us." He looked around the room, at Merrick's scars, at Wraith's steel jaw, at Adair's lifeless eyes. "We weren't built to lead. We were built to end things." A Draxian rebel spoke up. "But the people trust you. You gave them truth." Grant turned to him. "No, Lazarus gave them truth. We gave them fire." He stepped back, voice heavier than it had ever been. "And fire shouldn't build houses. It burns them down." That night, Grant stood outside the ship alone, staring at the stars. He wasn't looking at them. He was waiting. "You're really gone, huh?" he whispered. No answer, not that he expected one, but the silence still felt personal. Echo approached him quietly. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. "You told them the truth," she said. "I told them what they didn't want to hear," Grant replied. She looked up at him. "What happens now?" He thought about it. Then he answered simply, "We disappear again." They didn't stay. The reclamation vanished 3 days after the architect's fall. No comms, no broadcast, no ceremony, just gone. The crew didn't say goodbye. They didn't leave coordinates. They didn't form alliances. They left behind their weapons, their data, their black files, all of it handed over to the new provisional leadership rising from the ashes. And then, they were ghosts again, just like the first time. Years passed. The galaxy didn't become perfect. Corruption crawled back into corners. Trade syndicates filled old power vacuums. Minor wars sparked across forgotten borders. But something was different now. Something vital. No one built another council. No one dared. Because the memory of Terra had been etched into the stars, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as a warning. In a quiet system on the edge of nowhere, a child looked up at a rusted plaque embedded into the side of a refugee outpost. The words were burned into black alloy, old and half-buried in dirt. He read them aloud. When the council discovered Earth's real name, terror stole the galaxy's voice. But when Terra remembered who they were, the galaxy remembered what it meant to be free. He looked up at his father. Was Terra real? His father nodded. "They were real," he said. "They just didn't want to be remembered." And far beyond, in a system without a name, a man with a scar running from his temple to his collarbone stood beneath a broken sky. He looked older, tired, but his eyes still burned. He looked up, smiled faintly, then whispered to himself, "They finally forgot us." And with that, he walked into the storm,